No one wanted the snowed-in log cabin buried under 12 feet of Montana snow until an elderly couple paid $800 and opened a hidden hatch that revealed $285 million worth of secrets powerful people had killed to keep buried. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning frost clung to the windows of the Pinewood Ridge Community Center like skeletal fingers, and inside, 72-year-old Hollis Drummond sat beside his wife Willa, 69, staring at a sheet of paper that felt heavier than it should. Eviction notice. They had 60 days to vacate the cottage they'd been renting for the past 3 years. The owner's daughter was moving back from Seattle and wanted the property. Just like that, their quiet retirement was unraveling. Hollis's hands, weathered from 40 years working on the railroad, trembled slightly as he folded the notice and tucked it into his coat pocket. Beside him, Willa reached over and squeezed his knee. Her fingers were thin but strong, the kind of hands that had spent decades turning pages in the Pinewood Ridge Library before it closed down in 2008. She didn't say anything because they both knew words couldn't fix this. They lived on 2 modest pensions that barely covered groceries and medication. Finding another rental in their price range, especially in winter, felt impossible. The community center bulletin board caught Willa's eye as they stood to leave. Flyers for bake sales, lost cats, firewood delivery, and then, tucked in the corner, almost hidden behind a poster for the annual Christmas bazaar, a single sheet of printer paper. Auction notice, foreclosure sale, remote log cabin, 12 miles north of Pinewood Ridge, previous owner deceased, estate liquidation, starting bid $800, viewing by appointment only, auction December 14th. Willa pulled it down and studied it. Hollis leaned over her shoulder, smelling the faint lavender of her shampoo mixed with the coffee they'd shared that morning. 12 miles north, she murmured. That's got to be the old Thaddeus property. Hollis's jaw tightened. Everyone in Pinewood Ridge knew about that cabin. It sat high in the mountains, accessible only by a single dirt road that became impassable from October through May. The locals called it cursed. 3 different owners over the past 30 years, and all of them had either died up there or disappeared entirely. The last owner, a reclusive geologist named Thaddeus Crane, had been found frozen in his truck 2 winters ago, halfway down the mountain, like he'd been trying to escape something. "We're not going up there," Hollis said quietly. Willa folded the paper carefully. "We might not have a choice." That night, they sat at their small kitchen table, bills spread out like cards in a losing hand. The math was brutal. Their combined Social Security and pensions brought in $2,100 a month. Rent alone in Pinewood Ridge ran at least $1,200 for anything livable. Add utilities, medications for Willa's heart condition, Hollis's blood pressure pills, groceries, and the truck payment, and they were underwater every month. They'd been draining their savings, the small nest egg they'd built separately before they met, and now it was down to $11,300. Hollis had been married before, lost his wife Sarah to cancer in 2012. Willa had lost her husband Frank to a heart attack in 2014. They'd met at a grief support group in 2016, 2 broken people who found something unexpected in each other's company. They married quietly in 2018, combining their modest lives into something that felt whole again. But now, at their age, starting over felt terrifying. $800, Willa said, looking at the auction notice again. Even if we had to put another few thousand into making it livable, we'd own it outright. No rent, no landlord selling out from under us. Hollis shook his head. Willa, people died up there. People die everywhere, she said softly. And honestly, Hollis, what scares me more than some old cabin is spending our last years bouncing between our kids' spare rooms, being a burden. That hit him. He looked at her face, still beautiful to him despite the lines and the silver hair. He saw determination there, the same stubborn spark that had made her fight to keep the library open when the county tried to shut it down. She'd lost that battle, but she'd fought like hell. "All right," he said finally. "We'll go look at it." The county assessor's office was housed in a building that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. The clerk, a woman named Dottie who'd gone to school with Willa back in the 1970s, pulled up the property records with obvious reluctance. "You're not seriously thinking about bidding on the Crane place," Dottie said, peering over her reading glasses. "Just looking," Willa replied. Dottie printed out the information, but her expression said everything her words didn't. The property was 73 acres of heavily forested mountain land. The cabin itself had been built in 1976, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, wood stove heat, well water, septic system. Last assessed value, $42,000. But that was before it had sat empty for 2 years through brutal winters. "The road up there washes out every spring," Dottie warned. "You'd be snowed in from October to May minimum. No way emergency services could reach you. The phone lines don't even go up that far anymore, and you know what happened to the people who lived there." "What did happen?" Hollis asked. Dottie leaned in, lowering her voice even though they were alone. "First owner was a mining engineer named Garrett, moved up there in 1978, found dead in the cabin in 1983, looked like he'd been dead for weeks before anyone checked. Second owner, a woman named Patricia, lasted less than a year. Left in the middle of the night in 1984, abandoned everything, never came back. Then it sat empty until 1999, when Thaddeus Crane bought it. He lasted the longest, over 20 years, but you know how he ended up." "Frozen in his truck," Willa said. "Trying to get away from something," Dottie added. "That's what the sheriff said. Looked like he'd left in a panic, middle of a blizzard. Didn't even grab a coat." They drove up to view the property 3 days later. Hollis's old Ford F-150 struggled with the grade, chains clanking against the wheel wells as they climbed higher into the mountains. The road was barely a road, more like a suggestion carved through towering pines and Douglas firs. Snow had fallen the night before, another 8 inches on top of what was already there, and the world had gone white and silent. Willa gripped the door handle as the truck slid slightly on a curve. She didn't complain, didn't ask to turn back. Hollis had always loved that about her, her quiet courage. They'd been climbing for 40 minutes when the cabin came into view. It sat in a small clearing, surrounded by trees so tall they seemed to hold up the sky. The structure was larger than Hollis had expected, built from massive logs that had weathered to a deep grey. Snow covered the roof like a thick blanket, icicles hanging from the eaves like teeth. The windows were dark, some boarded up, others just empty and watching. Hollis cut the engine, and they sat in silence for a moment. The isolation was absolute. No other buildings, no power lines, no sound except wind moving through the trees. It felt like they'd driven off the edge of the world. "Well," Willa said finally, "it's still standing." They climbed out into snow that came up to their knees. The cold bit through their coats immediately. Hollis carried the key the county had given them, though he wasn't sure it would even work. The front door was solid wood, swollen from moisture but intact. He had to put his shoulder into it, and when it finally gave way, stale air rushed out, carrying the scent of old wood smoke and something else, something mineral and deep. Inside, Hollis found a light switch out of habit and flipped it. Nothing. Of course, no power. But Willa had brought flashlights, always prepared, always thinking ahead. The beams cut through darkness, revealing a space that stopped them both cold. The cabin wasn't abandoned. Not really. It was frozen in time. Furniture sat exactly as someone had left it. A coffee mug on the table, a book open on the arm of a chair, reading glasses folded on top. Coats hung by the door, boots lined up beneath them. It looked like Thaddeus had just stepped out for a moment and would be back any second. But it was the condition that shocked them. Despite 2 years of sitting empty through brutal winters, there was no mold, no water damage, no sign of animal intrusion. The place was cold, yes, but dry. And when Hollis ran his hand along the massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall, he felt something strange. Warmth, faint but unmistakable, rising from the floorboards. "Hollis," Willa called from the back, "come look at this." He found her in what must have been Thaddeus's bedroom. The bed was made, military corners, a stack of books on the nightstand. But Willa was pointing at the wall, where dozens of topographical maps had been pinned up, overlapping and marked with red ink. Circles, arrows, notes in cramped handwriting. Coordinates, depth measurements, mineral composition analyses. He was a geologist, Willa said, studying the maps. He was looking for something. They spent an hour exploring, moving room to room, discovering layer after layer of Thaddeus's life. The man had been meticulous, almost obsessive. Journals filled shelves in the main room, each one dated, each one filled with dense technical notes. The kitchen cabinets held enough canned goods to last through multiple winters. The bathroom had a propane-powered water heater that, amazingly, still worked when Hollis tested it. But it was the basement that really got their attention. The entrance was hidden behind a shelf in the pantry, and Hollis only found it because he leaned against the wood and felt it shift. The shelf swung inward, revealing steep stairs descending into darkness. "Maybe we should come back with better lights," Willa suggested, but Hollis was already starting down. The basement was small, just a root cellar really, with shelves lining the walls. More canned goods, some tools, boxes of old files. But in the back corner, partially hidden behind a stack of plastic storage containers, Hollis saw something that made him stop. A metal hatch set into the floor, maybe 3 feet square, with a wheel lock like something from a submarine. He knelt beside it, brushing away dust. The metal was clean underneath, not rusted, recently maintained. He reached for the wheel. "Hollis, wait," Willa said from the stairs. "Maybe we should—" But he was already turning it. The wheel moved smoothly, too smoothly, and with a hiss of air pressure, the hatch cracked open an inch. Warm air rushed up, carrying a smell like hot metal and stone. They both froze. Warm air, from underground, in the middle of winter, in an abandoned cabin. Hollis looked up at Willa, saw his own confusion reflected in her face. Slowly, he pulled the hatch open wider, revealing darkness below, and the top of a ladder made of stainless steel. "What the hell?" he whispered. Before they could investigate further, they heard it. An engine. Distant, but getting closer. Someone was coming up the mountain. They scrambled upstairs, Hollis closing the basement door behind them. Through the front window, they saw a black SUV churning through the snow, much newer and more capable than their old Ford. It pulled up beside their truck and a man climbed out. 50s, expensive jacket, the kind of boots that cost more than Hollis's monthly pension. The man didn't knock. He walked right up to the door and pushed it open like he owned the place. When he saw Hollis and Willa, he didn't seem surprised. "Didn't expect anyone up here," the man said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Gerald Mackenzie. I'm with Continental Mining and Extraction. You folks from the county?" "Just looking at the property," Hollis said carefully. "There's an auction." Gerald's expression shifted, something predatory sliding behind his eyes. "Is that right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but this property isn't suitable for residential living. Unstable ground. The county really shouldn't be selling it." "Seemed pretty stable to us," Willa said. Gerald smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you don't know what you're looking at. This land has significant geological concerns. In fact, my company has been in talks with the county about acquiring it for survey purposes." "The auction notice didn't mention that," Hollis said. "Didn't it?" Gerald pulled out his phone, made a show of checking something. "Well, I'm sure it will be updated. Wouldn't want anyone buying property that could, say, collapse into a sinkhole. Dangerous stuff, these mountains." The threat wasn't even subtle. Hollis felt Willa's hand find his, squeezed tight. They weren't stupid. This man wanted them gone, wanted them scared off, which meant there was something here worth scaring people away from. "We'll take our chances," Hollis said. "See you at the auction." Gerald's smile vanished. "That would be a mistake." "Maybe," Hollis replied, "but it'll be our mistake to make." They drove back down the mountain in silence, both processing what had just happened. The warm air from below, the pristine condition of the cabin, Gerald Mackenzie's barely veiled threats. The pieces didn't fit, but they suggested something bigger than an abandoned cabin. That night, Willa couldn't sleep. She sat at their kitchen table with her laptop, searching. Thaddeus Crane's name brought up a few results. He'd been a respected geologist in the 1980s and 90s, published papers on rare earth mineral deposits, worked for several major mining companies before dropping off the grid in 1999. The same year he bought the cabin. She dug deeper, searching property records, mining claims, geological surveys of the area. And there, buried in a 1997 environmental impact study, she found it. The region around the cabin sat on top of what geologists called a significant anomaly, mineral readings that didn't match anything else in Montana. The study had been commissioned by Continental Mining and Extraction, Gerald's company. They'd been looking for something up there for over 20 years. The auction was held in the county courthouse, a drafty room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. Hollis and Willa arrived early, sitting in the back. They'd talked it through 100 times. $800 starting bid. They'd go up to $5,000 if they had to, any more, and they'd be risking too much of their savings. But when the auctioneer called the lot, something strange happened. The room was full, maybe 30 people, but when bidding opened, no one raised their hand. The auctioneer repeated the starting bid. Silence. Hollis looked around, saw people shifting uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "We have 800, the auctioneer said when Hollis raised his paddle. He waited for the counter bid, but none came. People stared at their laps. One woman in the front row started to raise her hand, then stopped when the man beside her grabbed her wrist. "Going once," the auctioneer said, looking confused. "Going twice. Sold for $800 to Paddle 73. Just like that, they owned it. Walking out, they passed Gerald Mackenzie standing in the hallway. He watched them with cold calculation, phone pressed to his ear. Hollis heard him say, "They bought it. No, nobody else bid. Yeah, I know. We'll handle it." What happens next will turn their quiet retirement upside down, reveal a secret that powerful men have killed to protect, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous discoveries are the ones that come with a key. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Signing the papers took another week. The county clerk, Dottie, kept trying to talk them out of it. "You're making a mistake," she said, sliding the deed across the desk. "That place has a history." "So do we," Willa replied, signing her name. They moved in on a grey December afternoon, when the temperature sat at 14 degrees and falling. Their kids had called, begging them to reconsider. Hollis's daughter Melissa drove up from Billings, walked through the cabin once, and left in tears. "You're going to die up here," she said. Willa's son Todd was more direct. "This is insane. You're both almost 70 years old. What are you trying to prove?" But here was the truth. They weren't trying to prove anything. They were trying to survive. And something about this place, despite its history, despite the warnings, felt right. Or at least, it felt like theirs. The first week was brutal. They had to haul in a generator, get the well pump working, clear the chimney, split enough wood to last through the winter. Hollis's back screamed at him, and Willa's hands blistered despite her gloves. But slowly, they brought the cabin back to life. They found extra blankets in Thaddeus's closet, canned goods in the pantry with dates from 2022, like he'd been preparing for a siege. At night, they'd sit by the fire, exhausted, and listen to the house settle around them. And that's when they started noticing the sounds. Not scary sounds, not ghosts or wind, mechanical sounds. A low hum that seemed to come from deep below, rising through the floorboards, and the warmth. Even when the fire died down, certain spots in the floor stayed warm to the touch. On their 9th night in the cabin, Hollis woke at 3 a.m. to find Willa standing by the bedroom window. "What's wrong?" he asked. She pointed outside. Through the snow and darkness, down the long driveway, they could see lights, headlights, stationary, just sitting there, watching. "How long have they been there?" Hollis asked. 20 minutes. They pulled up, turned off the engine, and they've just been sitting there. They watched together, neither speaking. After another 10 minutes, the lights turned back on and the vehicle pulled away, tires crunching over frozen snow. "Gerald's people," Willa said. "Probably. They're watching us." "Yeah." They went back to bed, but neither slept. They both knew they'd stumbled into something bigger than a real estate deal. The question was, how deep did it go? The next morning, Hollis went back down to the basement. He'd been avoiding the hatch, partly from caution, partly from fear. But they needed to know. He brought better lights this time, a full tactical flashlight Willa had ordered online, and his old toolbox. The hatch opened easily, that same hiss of warm air. He shined the light down and saw the ladder descending about 20 feet into a shaft lined with smooth concrete. At the bottom, he could make out what looked like a corridor. "I'm going down," he called up to Willa. "Then I'm coming with you," she replied. They descended together, Hollis first, testing each rung. The metal was warm, almost hot. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a tunnel, maybe 6 feet wide and 7 feet high, lit by LED strips along the ceiling that flickered to life automatically. The walls were reinforced concrete, professionally done, nothing crude or makeshift about it. "Hollis," Willa breathed, "this isn't a basement." They walked forward, the tunnel extending about 50 feet before opening into a larger space. And when they emerged, they both stopped, unable to process what they were seeing. It was a laboratory, or had been. Stainless steel tables lined the walls, covered with equipment, beakers, testing apparatus, monitors dark but intact. Filing cabinets stood in neat rows, a computer setup that looked like it belonged in a high-tech facility, not buried under a mountain cabin. And along the back wall, floor-to-ceiling shelves holding dozens of sealed containers, each labeled with codes and dates. Hollis approached one of the containers, a heavy plastic drum about the size of a paint can. The label read, Sample 47-B, refined, purity 98.6%, mass 2.3 kilograms, estimated value per kilogram $200,000. He did the math in his head and felt his knees go weak. If that number was right, this one container held over $400,000 worth of refined material. And there were dozens of containers. Willa had found a logbook on one of the tables. She opened it, and Thaddeus's handwriting filled the pages. Dates going back to 2001, entries about extraction techniques, refinement processes, yield percentages, and on the last page, written in shaky handwriting, a final entry dated November 3, 2022. It read, "They know. I've seen the same vehicle 3 times this week. Continental won't stop until they find it. I won't let them. I've hidden everything, secured the facility, changed the access codes. If I don't make it, God forgive me for keeping this secret. It could change everything, but in the wrong hands, it will destroy everything. The mountain deserves better." The entry ended there. 2 months later, Thaddeus was found frozen in his truck. Hollis and Willa looked at each other in the fluorescent light of the underground laboratory, and the truth settled over them like snow. They hadn't bought an abandoned cabin. They'd bought a secret worth killing for. And the people who'd killed Thaddeus knew they were here. Above them, through 20 feet of earth and a century-old log cabin, the Montana wind howled. And somewhere down the mountain, in the darkness, headlights turned back on and began the slow climb toward them once again. The morning after they found the laboratory, Hollis and Willa sat at the kitchen table in silence. Neither had slept. The coffee in their mugs had gone cold an hour ago, but they kept holding them anyway, needing something to grip while their minds tried to make sense of the impossible. "We need to call someone," Willa said finally. "Who?" Hollis asked. "The sheriff? The county? And tell them what? That we found a secret laboratory under our cabin filled with containers worth millions. They'll think we're crazy. Or worse, they'll confiscate everything and we'll lose the property." "Then what do we do?" Hollis rubbed his face, feeling every one of his 72 years. "We figure out exactly what we have. We read everything Thaddeus left, and we don't tell anyone until we understand what we're dealing with." They spent that day in the underground facility, moving carefully, touching nothing at first, just cataloguing. Willa found more logbooks, years of them, documenting every aspect of Thaddeus's work. Hollis discovered a wall of filing cabinets containing geological surveys, mineral composition analyses, and extraction records going back to 2001. But it was the computer system that held the real treasure. When Hollis managed to power it up, using a generator Thaddeus had installed for backup power, they found years of digital records, video logs, audio recordings. Thaddeus had documented everything. Willa clicked on the first video file, dated March 15, 2001. Thaddeus's face filled the screen. Younger then, maybe late 40s, still had color in his beard. He looked excited, almost manic. "Day 1 of private extraction," Thaddeus said to the camera. "I've confirmed it. The anomaly Continental detected in 1997, the one they spent 3 years searching for and couldn't find. I found it. It's here, directly beneath this property. The richest deposit of rare earth elements ever discovered in North America, possibly the world." He held up a chunk of rock, dark and unremarkable looking. "This is bastnasite, but it's not like any bastnasite anyone's ever seen. The concentration of neodymium, praseodymium and dysprosium is off the charts. We're talking 98% purity in its natural state. That's impossible, but it's real." The video cut to Thaddeus in the tunnel they'd walked through, younger, stronger, drilling into the rock face. "The deposit runs deep," his voice narrated over the footage. "At least 200 feet down, maybe more. I've calculated approximately 400 metric tons of extractable material. At current market rates, refined and processed, this represents approximately $285 million. Willa grabbed Hollis's arm. $285 million? They kept watching. File after file, year after year. Thaddeus had spent 20 years carefully extracting and refining the minerals, working alone, telling no one. He'd built the laboratory piece by piece, hauling equipment up the mountain in the middle of winter when no one would see. He'd taught himself chemistry, metallurgy, industrial refining processes, but it was a video from 2019 that explained why. In it, Thaddeus looked older, tired. His beard had gone white. He sat at the desk in the laboratory, hands folded, choosing his words carefully. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead," he said. "And you've probably found the deposit. So you need to understand something. This isn't just about money. It's about what happens when you put this much power in the wrong hands." He pulled up images on a monitor beside him. Charts, graphs, geological data. Rare earth elements are the foundation of modern technology. Every phone, every computer, every electric car, every wind turbine, every guided missile. China controls 90% of the world's supply. They can cut us off whenever they want. This deposit could change that balance of power overnight. Thaddeus leaned toward the camera. "But here's what you don't know. Here's what I discovered after Continental tried to claim this land back in 1998. This mountain is part of a critical watershed. There are 3 streams that originate here, feeding into the Clark Fork River, which supplies drinking water to 70,000 people. One misstep in extraction, one accident, one leak, and you poison the entire system for generations." He pulled out a file, held it up to the camera. In 2003, Continental had an accident at their Wyoming facility. A tailings dam broke. 11 million gallons of contaminated water flooded into a tributary. They covered it up, paid off inspectors, buried the reports, relocated 3 families who got sick. I have proof. It's all here. The weight of what they were watching settled over Hollis and Willa like the mountain itself. So I made a choice, Thaddeus continued. I bought this land. I found the deposit, and I extracted it slowly, carefully, using methods that leave 0 contamination. It took me 20 years to pull out what Continental could have grabbed in 3. But I didn't poison anyone. I didn't destroy the mountain. And I kept these elements out of the hands of people who'd use them as weapons or bargaining chips in some political game. He looked directly into the camera, and Hollis felt like the man was talking specifically to them. Now it's yours. I don't know who you are. Maybe you're good people. Maybe you're not. But you have a choice. You can sell this to Continental, make your fortune, and watch them tear this mountain apart. Or you can protect it, use it, find a better way. The video ended. Willa was crying. Hollis realized his own cheeks were wet. They spent the next week barely leaving the underground facility. The temperature outside dropped to -20, snow falling almost constantly, and they were grateful for the isolation. It gave them time to understand what they'd inherited. The logbooks revealed everything. Thaddeus had been meticulous. Each container of refined material was catalogued with its exact composition, purity level, and current market value. There were 68 containers in total. The smallest held 0.5 kilograms. The largest held 5.2 kilograms. The total refined mass was approximately 143 kilograms. Using Thaddeus's market calculations, updated to current prices Willa found online, the total value was staggering. $287,600,000, give or take a few million. They were sitting on enough wealth to solve every problem they'd ever had, enough to leave their kids and grandkids set for life, enough to never worry about money again. And it was earned through methods that had protected the mountain, preserved the watershed, and kept these critical materials out of the hands of people who'd used them carelessly. "We can't sell it to Continental," Willa said one night. They were in the laboratory, surrounded by containers worth more than most people would see in 100 lifetimes. "I know," Hollis replied, "but we can't just leave it here either. Eventually, someone will find out. Gerald already knows something's here. That's why he's been watching." Hollis stood and walked to the back wall where Thaddeus had pinned dozens of maps and documents. One document kept catching his eye. It was a partially completed legal form, yellowed with age, dated August 2022. The header read, "Articles of Incorporation for the Thaddeus Crane Environmental Trust." He pulled it down, read through it carefully. Thaddeus had been trying to establish a legal trust, something that would protect the land and manage the minerals for environmental purposes. But the document was incomplete. Signatures missing, key sections blank. "He ran out of time," Hollis said, showing it to Willa. She scanned the pages, her librarian's eye catching details he'd missed. He was going to donate it, not to a company or the government, to an environmental research cooperative. Use the proceeds to fund clean energy development and watershed protection. But he never finished it. "No," Willa said softly, "because they killed him before he could." That night, Hollis couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the video, about Thaddeus's face, about the choice the man had laid out. Around 2 a.m, he gave up and went to the kitchen for water. Through the window he saw them again. Headlights, same spot as before. Just watching. But this time, the vehicle's door opened. A figure stepped out, bundled against the cold, and started walking toward the cabin. "Willa!" Hollis called, keeping his voice low but urgent. She appeared in the doorway in her nightgown and robe, instantly alert. She'd always been like that, a librarian's instinct for knowing when something was wrong. They watched the figure approach, not running, not sneaking, just walking steadily through knee-deep snow, breath visible in clouds. When the figure got close enough, the motion sensor light over the door clicked on. It was a woman. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair pulled back, wearing serious winter gear. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at the window where Hollis and Willa stood. She could obviously see them. She raised both hands, showing they were empty. Hollis grabbed the shotgun Thaddeus had left in the hall closet and moved to the door. Willa stayed back, phone in hand, though they both knew help was 40 minutes away even in good conditions. He cracked the door open. "Bit late for a social call," he said. The woman didn't smile. "My name is Saskia Cordova. I'm an environmental attorney, and you two are in serious danger." "From you?" "From the people who've been watching you every night for the past 2 weeks. Can I come in? Because if Gerald Mackenzie's security team sees me here, we're all in trouble." Hollis and Willa exchanged a glance. There was something in the woman's voice, an authenticity that didn't feel like a con. He opened the door wider. Saskia stepped inside, stomping snow from her boots, unwrapping the scarf from her face. Up close, she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, chapped lips. She'd been out in the cold for a while. "How did you get up here?" Willa asked. "We would have heard a vehicle." "I parked 3 miles down and snowshoed up. Took me 4 hours. Saskia pulled off her gloves, flexing stiff fingers. "I've been trying to reach you for days, but your phone lines are down and you don't have cell service up here." "How did you even know about us?" Saskia pulled out her phone, showed them a news article from a Montana regional website. The headline read, "Elderly couple buys cursed cabin for $800 at auction." The article was mostly gossip and speculation, but it mentioned their names and the property location. "I've been tracking this property for 3 years, Saskia said, "ever since Thaddeus Crane died. I'm part of a legal team that represents environmental interests in mineral disputes. Thaddeus contacted us in August of 2022, said he had something important, needed help setting up a trust. We scheduled a meeting for November." "He died before he could make it," Hollis said. "Exactly. And when he died, Continental Mining immediately filed a claim on the property, saying they had mineral rights from a previous survey. The county blocked it because the claim was fraudulent, but Continental's been watching this place ever since, waiting for someone to buy it so they could make an offer. Or make them disappear." Willa sat down heavily. "You're saying they killed Thaddeus?" "I'm saying Thaddeus died under suspicious circumstances, trying to leave his property in the middle of a blizzard without a coat. I'm saying the 2 owners before him also died under suspicious circumstances. And I'm saying Continental has a history of eliminating obstacles." Saskia pulled out a folder, laid photos on the table. Surveillance pictures, Gerald Mackenzie meeting with county officials, bank records showing payments to the previous sheriff, accident reports that had been altered. What happens next will force Hollis and Willa to make an impossible choice, reveal just how deep the conspiracy goes, and show them that protecting a secret this big means risking everything. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. 3 years ago, Saskia continued, Continental tried to buy the mineral rights to state land adjacent to this property. When the environmental impact study came back negative, someone broke into the state geologist's office and stole the original reports. The backup copies mysteriously corrupted. The geologist who did the study, a woman named Patricia Vance, was run off the road a week later. She survived, barely, but she won't talk about it. She moved to Oregon and refuses to discuss anything related to Continental. Hollis felt his chest tighten. "So what do you want from us?" "I want to know if Thaddeus found what I think he found, and if he did, I want to help you protect it the way he intended." Willa looked at Saskia for a long moment, then at Hollis. He could read his wife's face like a book after all their years together. She was making the same calculation he was. Trust a stranger who snowshoed 4 hours through a blizzard, or face Continental alone? "Come with us," Willa said. They led Saskia down to the basement, through the hidden door, down the ladder into the facility. When Saskia saw the laboratory, she stopped breathing. When she saw the containers, she had to sit down. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He actually did it. He actually extracted it." "You knew?" Hollis asked. "I suspected. The geological surveys, the reports Thaddeus sent us, everything pointed to a major deposit. But I never imagined this. Do you know what you have here?" "Approximately $287 million worth of refined rare earth elements," Willa said. "Give or take." Saskia laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Try closer to 400 million. Rare earth prices have skyrocketed since Thaddeus did these calculations. China announced export restrictions 6 months ago. The military is desperate for domestic sources. This could redefine American mineral independence." She stood, walked along the rows of containers, reading labels. Neodymium for electric motors, dysprosium for military applications, praseodymium for aircraft manufacturing, terbium for fiber optics. This is everything. This is decades of supply. "And Gerald knows it's here," Hollis said. Saskia turned. "Gerald suspects, but he doesn't know for sure. If he did, you'd already be dead. He's been searching for this deposit since the 1990s. Continental has spent tens of millions drilling exploratory holes all over this region. They know it's here somewhere, but Thaddeus hid it too well." "So what do we do?" Saskia pulled out her phone, started taking pictures. "We do what Thaddeus wanted to do. We finish establishing the trust. We document everything, and we go public before Continental can stop us." "Go public?" Willa asked. "It's the only way to protect yourselves. Right now, you're a liability. You're two elderly people sitting on a fortune, isolated, vulnerable. If you disappear, who would even know? But if the world knows what you have, if you've already committed it to an environmental trust, if you've already partnered with researchers and non-profits, then Continental can't touch you without triggering a massive investigation." Hollis shook his head. "We're not equipped for this. We're just two people trying to get by." Saskia looked at him, and her expression softened. "Mr. Drummond, Thaddeus chose to buy this property and protect it for over 20 years. He chose to extract these minerals carefully, in ways that didn't harm the environment. He chose to die rather than let Continental get them. And now, by pure chance or fate or whatever you want to call it, you've inherited that choice. You can walk away, sell it, take your money, or you can finish what he started." Willa reached over and took Hollis's hand. Her fingers were cold but strong. "What exactly would we be agreeing to?" Saskia sat down at Thaddeus's desk, pulled out a laptop. "First, we document everything, every container, every logbook, every piece of evidence. We create a digital record that gets stored in multiple locations. Then, we complete the trust formation. You two become the trustees. You donate the minerals to the trust, which means they no longer belong to you personally." "So we get nothing?" Hollis asked. "Actually, as trustees, you'd be entitled to reasonable compensation. And the trust can sell the minerals, but only under strict environmental guidelines. The proceeds would fund clean energy research, watershed protection, and community development in Pinewood Ridge. You'd have input on all major decisions, and you'd be protected legally from Continental's attempts to claim the deposit." "How long would this take?" "If we work fast, 72 hours to get the framework in place. Then we contact the media, the Environmental Protection Agency, and several non-profits I work with. We create enough noise that Continental can't make you disappear without everyone knowing exactly why." Hollis looked around the laboratory, at the containers Thaddeus had spent 20 years carefully filling, at the equipment he'd assembled in secret, at the maps marking every inch of the extraction site. He thought about the man's final video, the choice laid out so clearly. "What do you think?" he asked Willa. She squeezed his hand. "I think we didn't survive this long, just to spend our final years looking over our shoulders. I think we didn't raise our kids to be cowards. And I think Thaddeus left this to whoever bought the property because he believed the right people would eventually show up. Hollis smiled. His wife, the librarian who'd fought to keep books on shelves when budget cuts came, who'd taught literacy classes for free on weekends, who'd always believed that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. Of course she'd choose this path. "All right," he said to Saskia, "we're in." They worked through the night. Saskia photographed every container, every logbook page, every piece of equipment. She downloaded files from Thaddeus's computer, creating encrypted backups that she uploaded to secure servers. Hollis narrated videos explaining how they'd found the facility, what they understood about the extraction process, everything Thaddeus had documented. Willa read through the legal documents, her librarian's training making her surprisingly adept at parsing complicated language. She found gaps in Thaddeus's original trust paperwork, sections that needed updating to comply with current regulations. By dawn, they had the framework of a plan. The Thaddeus Crane Environmental Trust would be officially registered with the state. Hollis and Willa would serve as primary trustees. Saskia's law firm would provide legal representation. A board of directors would include environmental scientists, indigenous community representatives, and clean energy researchers. The minerals would be sold gradually, only to companies that met strict environmental standards. The proceeds would fund 3 initiatives: watershed protection for the Clark Fork River, clean energy technology development, and economic revitalization for Pinewood Ridge. "It's ambitious," Saskia admitted as they reviewed the documents over coffee at sunrise. "But it's achievable, and more importantly, it's defensible. Continental can challenge it, and they will, but they won't be able to claim you're exploiting a discovery you shouldn't have made. You're literally giving it away for public benefit." "When do we announce it?" Willa asked. "As soon as possible. But there's something you need to know. The moment we go public, your lives change completely. You'll be famous. Reporters will show up. Politicians will want to talk to you. And Continental will throw everything they have at discrediting you and stopping this." Hollis looked out the window at the mountains, at the pine trees heavy with snow, at the isolation that had felt suffocating 2 weeks ago, but now felt like borrowed time, precious and fleeting. "We know," he said. Saskia left the way she came, snowshoeing back down the mountain before full daylight. She promised to have the trust documents finalized by the end of the week, but Hollis and Willa both knew she was really leaving before Gerald's surveillance team saw her. They spent that day in the cabin, both exhausted but unable to sleep. Around noon, Hollis went down to the facility one more time. He walked among the containers, reading Thaddeus's labels, imagining the years of careful work. One man working alone, protecting something he believed was bigger than his own comfort or safety. He found a box he hadn't noticed before, tucked behind the filing cabinets. Inside were personal items. Photos. Thaddeus with a woman, both young, smiling. Thaddeus holding a baby. A wedding ring in a small velvet box. A sympathy card, the kind people send when someone dies. At the bottom, a letter addressed, "To whoever finds this." Hollis opened it with trembling hands. The letter was dated October 2022, just a month before Thaddeus died. It read, "I don't know who you are, but if you're reading this, you've found what I spent my life protecting. I hope you understand why I did what I did. My wife Margaret died in 2004. Cancer. We never had enough money for the experimental treatments. I found this deposit 2 years later, and I thought about how that money could have saved her. I was angry for a long time, but then I realized Margaret wouldn't have wanted me to destroy this mountain for money. She loved this place. We used to hike these trails together. She taught me to see beauty in small things. So I chose to extract the minerals slowly, carefully, in a way she would have approved of. I chose to protect the watershed that gives life to so many. I chose to keep these elements away from people who'd use them for weapons or profit without regard for consequences. It cost me everything. My career, my reputation, my relationship with my daughter who thought I'd gone crazy. But Margaret would have understood. And I hope you do too. Use this wisely. Use it to heal, not harm. That's all any of us can do. Thaddeus. Hollis folded the letter carefully, his vision blurred. He understood now. This wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about love expressed through protection. It was about choosing to sacrifice your own comfort because you believed something mattered more. He climbed back upstairs and found Willa in the kitchen, making soup from canned vegetables they'd found in Thaddeus's pantry. He showed her the letter without saying anything. She read it, wiped her eyes, and pulled him into a hug. They stood there, two people in their 70s, holding each other in a cabin that had become a sanctuary, a responsibility, and a final stand all at once. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. And somewhere down the mountain, Gerald Mackenzie was making plans. But for this moment, for this perfect, fragile moment, Hollis and Willa Drummond stood together and felt something they hadn't felt in years. Purpose, the kind that's worth fighting for, the kind that's worth whatever comes next. The morning after finding Thaddeus's letter, Hollis was splitting wood behind the cabin when the convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs churning through the snow, moving with the kind of confidence that said they'd made this trip before, scouted it, planned it. He set down the axe and walked to the front of the cabin where Willa was already standing on the porch, arms crossed. The vehicles stopped in a semicircle, blocking any route down the mountain. Gerald Mackenzie stepped out of the lead SUV, flanked by 2 men in suits that looked ridiculous in the Montana wilderness. Behind them, 4 more men emerged, these ones in tactical gear, the kind security contractors wear when they want to look official without being police. "Mr. and Mrs. Drummond," Gerald called out, his breath clouding in the frozen air. "We need to talk." "You're on private property," Hollis said. Gerald smiled, spreading his hands. "I know, your property, and that's exactly what we need to discuss. May we come inside? It's 15 below out here." Hollis looked at Willa. She gave a slight nod. If this was coming, better to face it head on. They led Gerald and his 2 suit companions into the cabin. The security contractors stayed outside, standing by the vehicles like sentries. Inside, Gerald didn't wait for an invitation to sit. He took the chair by the fireplace, positioned himself like he owned the place. The other 2 men, who hadn't introduced themselves, stood by the door. "I'll be direct," Gerald said. "My company, Continental Mining and Extraction, has invested considerable resources surveying this region. We believe there are valuable mineral deposits on or near this property. We'd like to make you an offer." "Not interested," Hollis said. Gerald's smile tightened. "You haven't heard the offer. $5 million. Cash. You sign over mineral rights, keep the surface property and cabin, and my company takes on all the extraction work. You live here peacefully, 5 million richer, and we get what we came for. Everybody wins." Willa spoke up. "Except the watershed. Except the 70,000 people who depend on water that originates on this mountain. Except the ecosystem that survived here for thousands of years." Gerald's expression shifted, something cold sliding behind his eyes. "Mrs. Drummond, I appreciate your environmental concerns, but let's be realistic. You're, 70 years old? Your husband's 72? You're living in a cabin with no cell service, 40 minutes from the nearest hospital. Last winter, the previous owner froze to death trying to leave this mountain. Is that really how you want to spend your final years? Worrying about watersheds?" "Thaddeus Crane didn't freeze to death," Hollis said quietly. "He was murdered, probably by someone you sent." The room went silent. The 2 men by the door shifted. Gerald's face went blank, carefully blank, the way people look when you've said something true that they can't acknowledge. "That's a serious accusation," Gerald said finally. "It's a true one. We found his laboratory. We found everything. We know what he discovered. We know what you've been looking for, and we know what you're willing to do to get it." Gerald stood slowly. His smile was gone. "Then you understand the situation. You're sitting on something that belongs in the hands of people who know how to use it. People with the resources, the expertise, the government connections to actually make it matter. What are you going to do with it? Two pensioners playing prospector." "We're going to protect it," Willa said. "The way Thaddeus intended." "Protect it," Gerald repeated. "With what? Your social security checks? You can't even afford to heat this cabin properly. You think you can stand up to Continental? We have lawyers who bill more per hour than you make in a month. We have connections at every level of government. We have ways of making problems disappear that you can't even imagine." "Is that a threat?" Hollis asked. "It's a reality check. You have 48 hours to reconsider my offer. After that, things get complicated. Property taxes get reassessed. Building inspectors find violations. Medical emergencies happen in remote locations. Life gets very difficult for people who make unwise decisions." Gerald walked to the door, his men following. He paused at the threshold. $5 million, Mr. Drummond. Think about your wife. Think about spending your final years in comfort instead of fighting a battle you cannot win. They left. The convoy pulled away, engines roaring, leaving deep tracks in the snow. Hollis and Willa stood at the window watching until the vehicles disappeared down the mountain. "We need to move faster," Willa said. That afternoon, they called Saskia using the satellite phone she'd left them. She answered on the first ring. "Did something happen?" Hollis told her about Gerald's visit, the threats, the 48-hour deadline. Saskia swore creatively. "Okay, this is bad but also good. He's scared. If he's offering $5 million, he knows exactly what you have, and he's desperate to get it before you can establish the trust." "Can we complete the trust in 48 hours?" Willa asked. "Legally, yes. Practically, it'll be close. I'm filing the paperwork today, but we need to accelerate the public announcement. I'm calling reporters, environmental groups, anyone who'll listen. We need to create so much attention that Continental can't make a move without the world watching." "What about us?" Hollis asked. "We're sitting ducks up here." "I know. I'm working on that too. I've contacted a non-profit that provides security for environmental activists. They're sending 2 people. Should arrive by tomorrow night." After the call, Willa opened her laptop. They had satellite internet, slow but functional, and she started researching rare earth elements with the kind of focused intensity she'd once used to help library patrons find obscure historical documents. Hollis watched her work, impressed as always by how his wife could transform from scared to determined in the span of a decision. "Listen to this," she said after an hour. "Rare earth elements are critical for virtually every modern technology. Electric cars need about 1 kilogram of neodymium per vehicle. Wind turbines need up to 600 kilograms. Military applications like guided missiles, night vision, satellite systems all depend on dysprosium and terbium, and China controls 92% of global production." "So this deposit really could change everything," Hollis said. "Not just could, would. According to this geological journal, a deposit of this size and purity could supply American manufacturing for 30 years. It could break China's monopoly. It could enable a complete transition to clean energy. This isn't just valuable, Hollis. This is strategic. This is the kind of thing nations go to war over." Hollis felt the weight of it settle deeper into his chest. No wonder Gerald's willing to kill for it. That evening, Sheriff Tom Mullins drove up the mountain. Hollis saw the patrol vehicle coming and tensed, but the sheriff came alone. No convoy, no backup. He was an old friend, had gone to high school with Willa's late husband, Frank. He knocked on the door with the kind of courtesy that said this wasn't an official visit. "Tom," Willa said, opening the door. "Come in." The sheriff stomped snow from his boots and stepped inside. He was early 60s, weathered face, the kind of cop who'd spent 40 years in a small town and seen everything twice. He took off his hat and held it in both hands. "I'm here unofficially," he said, "and I'm here as a friend. Gerald Mackenzie came to see me this afternoon. He suggested I do a wellness check on you two. Make sure you're safe up here, capable of caring for yourselves. He implied you might be suffering from dementia or some kind of mental decline." "And are we?" Willa asked, with a slight smile. Tom shook his head. "You're sharper than most people half your age, but that's not the point. The point is Gerald's building a case. He's talking to the county assessor, the health department, code enforcement. He's suggesting this property should be condemned, that you're not mentally competent to own it." "Can he do that?" Hollis asked.
"With enough money and the right connections? Yeah, he can make your lives hell. I've seen it before, not here but in other counties. Mining companies are good at making inconvenient people disappear, legally speaking. They bury you in paperwork, violations, court dates. They make it too expensive, too exhausting to fight."
"So what do we do?" Tom sat down heavily. "Honestly, I don't know. I took an oath to protect people, but I'm one sheriff in a county with more land than I can cover. Continental has resources I can't match. If they want you gone, I can slow them down, but I can't stop them, not alone." Willa made coffee and they sat together, 3 people in their 60s and 70s, trying to figure out how to fight a corporation worth billions. Tom told them about the previous owners, details he'd never shared before. Garrett, the mining engineer who'd owned the cabin in the 1980s, had filed a police report 3 days before he died. He claimed someone had been sabotaging his property, cutting brake lines, tampering with his well. The report disappeared from the files. Patricia, the second owner, had been found wandering Highway 93 in her nightgown, incoherent, insisting they were coming for her. She was institutionalized briefly, diagnosed with acute paranoid psychosis, and never came back to the cabin. "And Thaddeus?" Hollis asked. Tom's expression darkened. "The official cause of death was exposure, but I never bought it. Thaddeus was an experienced mountain man. He wouldn't leave his cabin without proper gear unless he was running from something, and his truck, when we found it, the engine was still warm. Someone else had been there recently. Did you investigate?"
"I tried, but the State Patrol took over jurisdiction, said it was a clear case of accidental death, closed the investigation in 48 hours. I've always suspected someone made a call, pulled strings, but I had no proof."
They talked until midnight. Tom promised to watch the property, do drive-bys as often as he could, and keep his radio on in case they needed help. But all 3 of them knew it was inadequate. If Continental wanted to move against them, a small-town sheriff couldn't stop it. The next day, Hollis noticed the truck was leaking oil. He crawled underneath and found the drain plug had been loosened, just enough to cause a slow leak that would drain the engine over the course of a week. Sabotage. Someone had been up here, had accessed their property without them knowing. He showed Willa. Her face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "They're trying to trap us. If we can't leave, we can't get help. I can fix it, but we need supplies, new oil, maybe a new plug to be safe. Can we make it to town?" Hollis checked the oil level. "If we go now and don't stop, yeah, but it's risky." They decided Willa would stay at the cabin while Hollis made the run. She protested, not wanting to be alone, but they both knew it was safer than leaving the property unguarded. Hollis took the shotgun from the cabin and gave it to her. "Anyone comes up here while I'm gone, you don't open the door. You call Tom, then Saskia, then you hide in the laboratory if you have to." "Just come back safe," she said, kissing him. The drive down was tense. The truck handled badly with low oil, knocking sounds coming from the engine. Hollis kept checking the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see black SUVs following. He made it to Pinewood Ridge in 40 minutes, pulled into the auto parts store, and got everything he needed. But as he was loading supplies into the truck bed, he saw them. 3 men standing outside the coffee shop across the street. They weren't locals. Designer winter gear, expensive sunglasses, the kind of casual stance that came from military or security training. One of them was on a phone, eyes locked on Hollis. He got in the truck and drove. Not back up the mountain, not yet. He needed to know if they'd follow. He took side streets, circling through the residential area, and sure enough, a grey sedan pulled in behind him, staying back, not obvious but definitely tailing him. Hollis's heart pounded. He couldn't lead them back to the cabin, couldn't risk them knowing exactly where Willa was. He turned onto Highway 93, heading south, away from the property. The sedan followed. He sped up, pushing the damaged truck harder than he should. The knocking in the engine got louder. 5 miles south of town, Hollis made a decision. There was a logging road that branched off into national forest. He knew it well, had driven it years ago when he and Sarah used to camp. He took the turn fast, the truck fishtailing on ice, and gunned it down the narrow road. The sedan followed, but couldn't match his speed on the rough terrain. Their vehicle sat too low, scraped on snowbanks. Hollis pushed deeper into the forest until he found what he was looking for, a turnoff that led to an abandoned logging camp. He took it, then immediately backed the truck into a thick stand of pines, killing the engine. Through the trees, he watched the sedan crawl past, searching. They stopped, reversed, but couldn't see where he'd gone. After 15 minutes, they gave up and headed back toward the highway. Hollis waited another 30 minutes, hands shaking, before he started the truck again. The engine barely turned over. The oil situation was critical, but he managed to nurse it back to the highway, then up toward the cabin, taking a different route, longer but less predictable. He made it back just as the sun was setting. Willa met him at the door, relief flooding her face. "I heard the engine struggling. What happened?" He told her everything while fixing the oil leak. They were being followed. Continental wasn't just watching anymore. They were actively pursuing, tracking movements, preparing for something. That night, Willa couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with Thaddeus's journals, reading by lamplight. Hollis found her at 2 a.m, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" She showed him an entry from March 2021. Thaddeus had written about his daughter, Emily. She'd visited the cabin, begged him to sell, to move somewhere safe. She'd told him she was getting married, wanted him at the wedding, wanted him to meet his future grandchildren. But she couldn't accept what he was doing, couldn't understand why he'd choose the mountain over family. Thaddeus's handwriting got shaky toward the end of the entry. "I told Emily I loved her more than anything. But some choices aren't about love. They're about what's right." She left crying. "I don't think she'll come back. And maybe that's better. Maybe if she stays away, she'll be safe. But God, it hurts. It hurts more than all the years of work, all the isolation, all the danger. Losing your child's respect, that's the real cost of doing what you believe is right." "We're making the same choice," Willa whispered. "Our kids think we're crazy. Melissa called yesterday, practically begging Hollis to sell and move to Billings. Todd sent me an email saying we're being selfish, risking our health for nothing." Hollis pulled her close. "Is that what you think? That this is nothing?" "No. But I understand why they're scared. We're scared. And maybe we're being foolish. Maybe 2 old people have no business trying to fight a corporation. Maybe we should take Gerald's money and—" "You don't believe that?" She pulled back, looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "What if something happens to you, Hollis? What if I have another heart episode up here? What if we die on this mountain like Thaddeus did? And for what? So we can say we stood our ground?" Hollis didn't have a good answer. The truth was, he'd been asking himself the same questions. They were 72 and 69 years old. They had grandchildren they barely saw. They had health problems that required monitoring. What were they doing on a mountain in winter, sitting on a fortune that had already gotten 3 people killed? But then he thought about Thaddeus's letter, about Margaret who died because they couldn't afford treatment, about a man who chose to protect something he believed mattered more than his own comfort. about the choice laid at their feet. "I don't know if we'll succeed," Hollis said finally. "I don't know if this is wise or foolish. But I know that every time I've played it safe, every time I've chosen comfort over conscience, I've regretted it. And I know that you, Willa Drummond, are the bravest person I've ever met. You spent 30 years fighting to keep books in the hands of people who needed them. You taught adults to read when no one else would volunteer. You're not someone who backs down when things get hard." Willa wiped her eyes. "We could die up here." "We could. Or we could die in some nursing home, comfortable and safe, and wondering if we could have been braver. I'd rather go out fighting." She laughed, a broken sound that turned into a sob. "You're crazy." "So are you. That's why we're perfect for each other." They held each other as the fire burned down to embers. Two old people trying to be braver than they felt. The security team Saskia sent arrived the next evening. Two women, ex-military, competent and professional. Their names were Maya and Jade, both in their 30s, both with the kind of calm efficiency that came from years of protecting people in dangerous situations. They assessed the property, set up a rotation for watch duty, and installed motion sensors along the driveway. "You've got natural advantages," Maya said, studying the terrain. "Single-access road, good sight lines, thick forest for cover. But you're also sitting ducks if someone decides to come in force. Our job is to buy you time. If something goes wrong, we get you out, not fight them off." "How long can you stay?" Willa asked. "As long as you need us. Saskia's non-profit is covering our costs. Having them there helped." Hollis and Willa could sleep in shifts, knowing someone was watching, but it also reinforced how serious the situation had become. They needed armed guards to protect them in their own home. Saskia called on the third day with news. "The trust paperwork is filed. You're officially trustees as of this morning, and I've gotten interest from 3 major news outlets. One wants to send a reporter tomorrow." "Already?" Willa asked. "We need to move fast. Gerald's building his case with the county. He's filed a formal complaint questioning your mental competency. He's gotten a judge to schedule a hearing for next week. If we don't get ahead of this, they'll tie you up in court until you can't fight back." "What do we do?" "You do interviews. You tell your story. You show the world what you found and what Continental is trying to take. Once it's public, once there's political pressure and media attention, Gerald can't make you disappear without massive blowback." The reporter arrived the next morning, a young woman named Amanda from the Montana Chronicle. She hiked up with a photographer, both of them underdressed for the cold but determined. Hollis and Willa led them through the cabin, down to the laboratory, and showed them everything. Amanda's eyes got wider with every container, every logbook, every piece of evidence. "This is unbelievable," she breathed. "Do you understand how big this story is? This isn't just local news. This is national, maybe international." They spent 4 hours doing the interview. Hollis talked about buying the cabin, finding the hatch, discovering Thaddeus's work. Willa explained the environmental implications, the trust they were forming, their commitment to protecting the watershed. Amanda asked hard questions. Why not sell to Continental? Why risk everything? Weren't they scared? "Of course we're scared," Willa said. "We're terrified, but fear isn't a reason to do nothing. Thaddeus was scared too. He did this anyway. And if we walk away now, if we let Continental tear this mountain apart, then his sacrifice meant nothing." The photographer took pictures of everything. The cabin, the laboratory, Hollis and Willa standing by the hatch. But the most powerful image was candid. Willa sitting at Thaddeus's desk reading one of his journals, her face a mixture of determination and grief. That's the photo that would eventually make the front page. Amanda promised the story would run in 3 days. "I need time to verify everything, get responses from Continental and county officials, but this is huge. You're going to be famous." What happens next will turn this isolated mountain into the center of a media firestorm, reveal a truth nobody expected, and prove that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. After Amanda left, Hollis and Willa sat on the porch despite the cold. The mountains stretched endlessly around them, white and silent and indifferent to human struggles. It was beautiful, and it was worth protecting. "No going back now," Hollis said. "Was there ever?" Willa replied. That night, the temperature dropped to -25, the kind of cold that made breathing hurt, that turned any exposed skin dangerous within minutes. Hollis woke at midnight to Maya shaking his shoulder. "We've got a problem," she said quietly. He followed her to the window. Down at the base of the driveway, barely visible through the trees, were lights. Not headlights, work lights, and the sound, faint but unmistakable, of machinery. "How long have they been there?" Hollis asked. 20 minutes. Jade's watching them with binoculars. Looks like they're digging." "Digging what?" "That's what worries me." They woke Willa, and the 5 of them gathered in the kitchen. Jade came in from her watch post, face grim. "They're cutting the road, bulldozer, maybe a backhoe. They're creating a trench across the access road about a quarter-mile down." "Blocking us in?" Hollis said. "More than that. If they cut deep enough, it'll take weeks to repair. You won't be able to get out, and emergency services won't be able to get in." "Can we stop them?" Maya shook her head. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. I counted 8 men, all armed. This is a professional operation." Hollis looked at Willa. Her face was pale but composed. "They're going to trap us, then wait us out. We'll run out of food, fuel. Eventually we'll have to surrender or call for help that can't reach us." "We need to leave now," Jade said. "While we still can. Get to town, get somewhere public where they can't touch you. And abandon the cabin. Abandon everything Thaddeus protected. You can't protect it if you're dead." They debated for 30 minutes, voices rising. Maya and Jade were clear. The tactical situation was untenable. Continental had made their move. Staying was suicide. But Hollis and Willa kept coming back to the same point. If they left, Gerald would move in, take everything, and they'd never get it back. Finally, Saskia's satellite phone rang. Hollis answered, and Saskia's voice came through, urgent and excited. "The story just broke. Amanda couldn't wait. Her editor pushed it live online tonight. It's everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, news aggregators. You're viral." "Saskia, they're cutting the road. They're trapping us here." Silence. Then, "Give me 10 minutes. I'm making calls." Those 10 minutes felt like hours. They watched through windows as the machinery continued working, the trench growing deeper. Hollis held Willa's hand. If this was it, if this was where they made their stand, at least they were together. The phone rang again. Saskia's voice was different now, electric with urgency. "I got through to Senator Michelle Torres. She chairs the Environmental Committee. She's seen the story and she's furious. She's calling the governor, the attorney general, and she's sending help." "What kind of help?" "State police, maybe National Guard. She's declaring this an environmental crime scene that needs federal protection. But Hollis, it's going to take time. You need to hold out until morning." Hollis looked at the clock. 6 hours until dawn. "We can do that." "There's something else. Your grandson posted the story on TikTok. It's got 3 million views. People are organizing. There's a convoy forming in Missoula. Citizens planning to drive up tomorrow to protect you. You're not alone anymore." After the call, Hollis shared the news. Maya and Jade looked skeptical but hopeful. Willa just nodded, like she'd known all along that once the story got out, people would respond. But then, at 2 in the morning, everything changed. Willa made a sound, a small gasp, and pressed her hand to her chest. Hollis turned just in time to see her face go grey. She stumbled, caught herself on the table. "Willa? It's my heart. Pressure. Can't breathe right." Hollis's world narrowed to one point. His wife struggling for air. All the minerals, all the money, all the principles, none of it mattered compared to this. He grabbed the satellite phone, called 911, but the dispatcher's response shattered him. "Sir, there's a road blockage preventing access to your location. We can't get an ambulance through. You need to bring her down yourselves." "There are men with machinery blocking the road."
We're aware of the situation. State police are en route, but it'll be several hours. Is this life-threatening?
Hollis looked at Willa, now sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, her breathing shallow. "Yes, she has a heart condition. She needs a hospital." "Then you need to find a way down. I'm sorry, sir, that's the best I can do." Hollis ended the call, looked at Maya. "Can we get past them?" Maya's expression was grim. "Not in a vehicle. Maybe on foot, if we move fast. But in this cold, in her condition." She didn't finish. They all knew. A quarter-mile hike in -25-degree weather with a heart condition would likely kill Willa before they reached help. Hollis knelt beside his wife. Her eyes were closed, her breathing labored. This was the impossible choice. Stay, and hope she survived until help arrived, or try to leave and possibly kill her in the attempt. "Hollis," Willa whispered, Don't give them what they want." "I don't care what they want. I care about you." "If I die, if we lose this, Thaddeus died for nothing." "Thaddeus is dead. I'm not losing you too." Jade's radio crackled. She'd been monitoring police frequencies. Her voice cut through their argument. "State police are 15 minutes out, and there's something else. I'm picking up multiple civilian vehicles on the highway, dozens of them, all heading this way." They moved to the window. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, they could see new lights. Not work lights, headlights, lots of them. A convoy of civilian vehicles, trucks and SUVs and cars, all driving toward the cabin. Saskia's phone rang again. Hollis answered. "It's the TikTok video," Saskia said. "People are mobilizing. There are over 200 vehicles heading to your location. They're coming to protect you." Hollis looked at Willa, still on the floor, still struggling. At the machines cutting the road. At the lights of ordinary people deciding to drive through the night to help two strangers. The world had become surreal, balanced on the edge of disaster and hope. And in that moment, illuminated by firelight and the cold glow of approaching headlights, Hollis Drummond understood something Thaddeus had learned decades before. Some things are worth protecting because of what they represent, not what they're worth. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you stand for something bigger than yourself, the world shows up to stand with you.
The question was whether they'd arrive in time.
The convoy of civilian vehicles reached the road blockage at 3:17 in the morning. Hollis watched through binoculars as dozens of trucks and SUVs pulled up, their headlights illuminating the Trench Continental's crew had dug across the access road. People climbed out. Ordinary Montanans in winter coats and work boots, many carrying cameras and phones, filming everything. Gerald Mackenzie's security team was outnumbered within minutes. What had been 8 armed contractors suddenly faced over 100 citizens, and more kept arriving. Someone had set up a live stream. Hollis could see the glow of phones held high, broadcasting to the world. But Willa was getting worse. Her lips had a blue tinge now. Her breathing came in short, painful gasps. Jade had given her aspirin, propped her up with pillows, but they all knew she needed a hospital. Maya was on the radio with state police, shouting coordinates, begging them to hurry. "There's a National Guard helicopter en route from Great Falls," Maya said. "ETA 25 minutes, but they need a landing zone." Hollis looked out at the clearing beside the cabin. Deep snow surrounded by tall pines. "The front clearing, if we can mark it somehow." Jade was already moving. She grabbed road flares from their emergency supplies and ran outside. Within minutes, she'd created a rough square of red light, marking the only flat space big enough for a helicopter. The flares burned against the snow like wounds in the darkness. Hollis knelt beside Willa again. She was drifting in and out of consciousness. He held her hand, feeling how cold her fingers had become despite the fire blazing in the stone hearth. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Help is coming. You just have to hold on." Her eyes fluttered open. Did we do it? Did we protect it?"
"We're protecting it. You're protecting it. But I need you to keep fighting."
"Tired, Hollis. So tired." "I know, but you don't get to quit on me. We've got too much left to do. Grandkids to spoil, anniversaries to celebrate. You promised me at least 20 more years of telling me I'm wrong about things." She managed the ghost of a smile. "You are wrong about most things. See? You can't leave. Who else is going to keep me honest?" Outside, the situation at the road blockage had shifted dramatically. The first state police vehicles had arrived, and Gerald Mackenzie was shouting at the officers, demanding they arrest the civilians for trespassing and obstruction. But the crowd had phones out, filming everything, and the police seemed uncertain about how to proceed. Then Sheriff Tom Mullins arrived. Hollis watched through the window as Tom walked straight up to Gerald, said something brief, and pointed at the excavation equipment. Gerald's face went red. He gestured angrily, pulled out his phone, made calls, but the machinery had gone quiet. The workers had stopped digging. They stood by their equipment looking uncomfortable, probably realizing they'd been caught on camera doing something that would be hard to explain in court. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the night. Hollis ran outside as the National Guard chopper approached, its searchlight sweeping across the clearing. Jade waved her arms, guiding it down. The rotor wash kicked up a blizzard of loose snow, the noise deafening. The moment it touched down, 2 medics jumped out with a stretcher.
Hollis led them inside. They worked fast, professional, checking Willa's vitals, starting an IV, getting her strapped onto the stretcher. One of them looked at Hollis. "You her husband?"
"Yes." "You riding with her?" Hollis looked back at the cabin, at the hatch still open in the basement, at everything Thaddeus had protected, everything they'd sworn to guard. Maya saw his hesitation and stepped forward. "Go. We've got this. Jade and I will stay. The place is surrounded by witnesses now. Continental can't touch it."
"But your wife needs you. That's what matters. Everything else can wait."
Hollis grabbed his coat and followed the stretcher outside. They loaded Willa into the helicopter, Hollis climbing in beside her. As the aircraft lifted off, he looked down at the cabin growing small beneath them, at the ring of flares Jade had set, at the convoy of headlights still arriving on the road below. Ordinary people who'd driven through the night because they believed 2 old people were worth protecting. The flight to Kalispell Regional Medical Center took 18 minutes. Willa was unconscious when they landed, her heart rhythm dangerously irregular. They rushed her straight to the cardiac unit. Hollis tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him at the emergency room doors. "You'll have to wait here, sir. The doctors need to work. We'll update you as soon as we can." He stood in the waiting room, coat still dusted with snow, watching the doors she disappeared through. His hands were shaking. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this helpless, this terrified. The cabin, the minerals, the trust, all of it meant nothing if Willa didn't survive. A television in the waiting room was showing news coverage. He looked up and saw his own cabin on the screen. Aerial footage from a news helicopter showing the crowd at the road blockage, the state police vehicles, the standoff. The chyron read, "Elderly couple's discovery sparks confrontation with mining giant." His phone rang. Saskia. "Hollis, is Willa okay?" "I don't know. They took her into emergency. I'm waiting." "I'm so sorry. But Hollis, you need to know what's happening. The story has exploded. It's on every major news network. Senator Torres is calling for a federal investigation into Continental. The Attorney General's office has announced they're looking into the previous owner's deaths, and there are protests forming outside Continental's headquarters in Denver." "That's good," Hollis said numbly, not really processing it. "It's more than good. It's seismic. You've changed the conversation about mineral rights and environmental protection. People are calling you heroes. I just want my wife to be okay. I know. I'm driving up right now. I'll be there in 6 hours. The waiting room slowly filled with people. First, Melissa arrived, Hollis's daughter, driving from Billings in the middle of the night. She hugged him without saying anything, just held on. Then Todd showed up, Willa's son, red-eyed from crying and driving. They sat together in plastic chairs, drinking terrible coffee, waiting. Dawn came. Through the hospital windows, Hollis watched the sky turn from black to grey to pale blue. He'd been awake for over 24 hours. His back ached, his head pounded. But he couldn't sleep, couldn't rest until he knew. At 8:30, a doctor emerged. She looked tired, but her expression was neutral, professionally calm. "Mr. Drummond." Hollis stood so fast he nearly fell. Melissa caught his arm. "How is she?" "Stable. She had a significant cardiac event, what we call unstable angina. Her heart was under tremendous stress. We've got her on medication and we're monitoring her closely. She's going to need rest, probably some lifestyle modifications, but she's going to be okay." Hollis's legs went weak. Melissa guided him back to his chair. He put his face in his hands and cried, great shaking sobs of relief that he couldn't control. Todd's hand landed on his shoulder, solid and warm. "Can I see her?" Hollis asked when he could speak again. "She's sleeping right now, but give us an hour to get her settled in a regular room, then yes." The doctor left. Hollis sat surrounded by his family, feeling like he'd been hollowed out and filled back up with something lighter than air. She was going to be okay. Willa was going to be okay. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Situation at cabin secure. State police have established a perimeter. Continental's crew is gone. You've got about 50 people camping out in your driveway, refusing to leave until you get back. They brought coffee and donuts. It's like a tailgate party up here." Hollis showed the text to Melissa and Todd. Todd laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Your cabin has become a campground for activists. That's so on brand for you and Mom." By midday, Hollis was allowed into Willa's room. She was propped up in bed, oxygen tube in her nose, IV in her arm, but her eyes were open and clear. When she saw him, she smiled. "Hey," she said, voice raspy. "Hey yourself." He pulled a chair close, took her hand. "You scared the hell out of me." "Scared myself. What happened? I remember the helicopter, then nothing." "You had a heart episode. A bad one. But you're going to be fine. The doctors say with rest and medication, you'll recover fully." "And the cabin, Gerald?" "The cabin's fine. There are about 50 people camped out protecting it. The story went viral. We're apparently famous." Willa closed her eyes, processing. "Did we win?" "I think so. I think we actually won." Over the next 3 days, while Willa recovered in the hospital, the world continued to shift around them. The news coverage intensified. Reporters camped outside the hospital, requesting interviews. Senator Torres flew to Montana and held a press conference announcing new legislation to protect environmental whistleblowers and regulate mineral extraction on private land. Continental Mining released a statement denying all allegations and threatening lawsuits. But then someone leaked internal documents showing the company had known about Thaddeus's discovery for years and had been systematically trying to acquire the property through intimidation and fraud. Gerald Mackenzie was placed on administrative leave. The company's stock dropped 23% in one day. Saskia arrived with a team of lawyers and environmental scientists. They set up a temporary office in the hospital cafeteria, working on finalizing the trust documents and coordinating with government agencies. The Thaddeus Crane Environmental Trust was officially recognized by the state on the 4th day after Willa's hospitalization. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source. A woman named Emily Crane contacted Saskia, saying she was Thaddeus's daughter. She'd seen the news coverage and wanted to know what her father had really been doing all those years they hadn't spoken. Saskia arranged for Emily to meet Hollis in the hospital. She was in her 40s with her father's sharp eyes and careful movements. She sat across from Hollis in the cafeteria, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, looking lost. "I thought he was crazy," she said. "My whole adult life, I thought my father had lost his mind, living alone on that mountain, refusing to sell, refusing to move. We fought about it constantly. I stopped visiting, I stopped calling, and when he died, I felt relieved, like finally he couldn't hurt himself anymore." "He wasn't crazy," Hollis said gently. "I know that now. I've read the articles, seen what he built. He was protecting something, and I called him selfish. I said he cared more about rocks than family." She wiped her eyes. "I can't take that back. I can't apologize. He's gone." "He left journals, dozens of them. There are entries about you, about how much he loved you, how proud he was. He didn't blame you for not understanding." Emily's face crumpled. "Can I read them?" "They're yours if you want them. You're his daughter. You should know who he really was." They sat together for a long time. Two people connected by a man who'd died trying to protect something bigger than himself. Eventually, Emily asked, "The trust you're setting up, what will it do?" Hollis explained the plan. The minerals would be sold gradually, only to companies meeting strict environmental standards. The proceeds would fund three main initiatives: protection of the Clark Fork watershed, development of clean energy technology, and economic revitalization of Pinewood Ridge. There would also be a scholarship fund in Thaddeus's name for students studying environmental science. "I want to be part of it," Emily said. "If you'll have me. I want to help finish what my father started. Maybe that's how I apologize." Saskia, who'd been listening nearby, spoke up. "We'd love to have you on the board of directors. Your father's vision should guide this work, and who better to represent that than his daughter?" By the end of the week, Willa was strong enough to be discharged. The doctors prescribed medication, scheduled follow-up appointments, and warned her to avoid stress. Hollis laughed at that last part. Bit late for that advice. But Willa was clear-eyed and determined. "I'm not becoming an invalid. We started something and we're going to see it through." The drive back to the cabin took 3 times longer than usual because people kept stopping them. At the gas station in Pinewood Ridge, the owner insisted their fuel was free. At the diner, strangers bought them lunch and asked for photos. The waitress, a woman who'd lived in town for 40 years, hugged Willa and cried. "You saved this place," she said. "People are talking about Pinewood Ridge again. Tourists are coming. We might actually survive." When they finally reached the mountain road, they found it had been repaired. The trench Continental had dug was filled and graded smooth. A note attached to a stake read, "Fixed it. Couldn't let those bastards win." Signed by the Cascade County road crew. The cabin looked different somehow. Maybe it was the prayer flag someone had hung in the trees, or the handmade sign near the driveway reading Thaddeus Memorial Site. Or maybe it was just that the place no longer felt isolated. It felt connected, part of something larger. Maya and Jade met them at the door, both women grinning. "Welcome home. You've got mail." Inside, stacks of letters covered the kitchen table, thousands of them from people all over the country. Hollis and Willa spent that evening reading them, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. A veteran from Texas wrote, "Your courage reminds me why I served. Thank you for protecting what matters." A teacher from Oregon, "I'm using your story in my classroom to teach students about environmental stewardship and civic responsibility." A teenager from Florida, "My generation inherits the planet you're protecting. Thank you for fighting for our future." But the letter that made Willa cry was from a widow in Montana. She wrote, "My husband died 10 years ago. Since then, I've felt like my life was over, like I had nothing left to contribute. Watching you two fight for something at your age, it reminded me that we're never too old to matter. I've started volunteering at our local nature center. Thank you for showing me I still have purpose." "This is what Thaddeus never got to see," Willa said, holding the letter. "The impact of what he did. He died thinking he'd failed, thinking he'd lost his daughter and his community for nothing. But look at this. Look at what his choice started." Over the following months, the transformation accelerated. The trust was fully operational by February, with Hollis and Willa as primary trustees, Emily Crane as heritage director, and Saskia as legal counsel. They assembled a board that included environmental scientists, indigenous representatives from the Confederated Salish and Kiotahene tribes, and community members from Pinewood Ridge. The first batch of refined minerals was sold to a cooperative of clean energy manufacturers for $47 million. The sale made international news. China threatened trade sanctions. The U.S. Department of Energy called it a watershed moment for domestic mineral independence. But for Hollis and Willa, what mattered most was what happened next. The trust used $15 million to establish a comprehensive watershed protection program, funding monitoring stations, restoration projects, and research into sustainable water management. The Clark Fork River, which supplied drinking water to 70,000 people, would be protected in perpetuity. $20 million went to a clean energy development fund, providing grants to researchers working on battery technology, wind power, and solar energy systems. The fund specifically prioritized projects that used rare earth elements efficiently and ethically, and $10 million was invested in Pinewood Ridge itself. The trust funded renovation of the closed library, which reopened as the Thaddeus Crane Community Center, offering education programs, makerspaces, and environmental workshops. They provided grants for local businesses, funded infrastructure improvements, and created jobs. Willa, despite her doctor's warnings about stress, threw herself into the library project. She worked with architects to design a building that honored books while embracing technology. She recruited volunteers, organized collections, and personally oversaw every detail. On opening day, 6 months after they'd bought the cabin, over 2,000 people showed up. The governor cut the ribbon. Senator Torres gave a speech. But the most powerful moment came when Emily Crane unveiled a portrait of her father that would hang in the main reading room. "My father believed knowledge should be shared," Emily said, voice shaking. "He believed that protecting the environment and empowering communities weren't separate goals, but parts of the same mission. This center, built with resources he spent his life protecting, embodies that vision. And I wish I'd understood that while he was still alive. But maybe the best apology is making sure his work continues." The portrait showed Thaddeus in his younger days, before the isolation and fear, when he'd still been a man with a family and hope. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Thaddeus Crane, 1952 to 2022. He chose protection over profit and proved one person can change the world." Hollis stood beside Willa in the crowd, watching children run through the new library, touching books, laughing. He thought about the $800 bid that had changed everything, about the choice they'd made to stay and fight, about how close they'd come to losing it all. "Was it worth it?" he asked Willa quietly. She didn't answer right away, just watched the scene before them, Emily Crane talking with young students about her father, Saskia meeting with tribal elders about collaborative management of the watershed, Maya and Jade, who'd become friends, helping set up computers in the teen area. "Ask me that on my deathbed," Willa finally said. "But right now, yeah, I think it was worth every terrifying moment." The cabin itself became something neither Hollis nor Willa had anticipated. A symbol. People made pilgrimages to see it, driving up the mountain road that was now maintained year-round by the county. They'd take photos, read the historical plaques Saskia had installed explaining Thaddeus's work, and leave notes of gratitude. Hollis and Willa established visiting hours 3 days a week, offering tours of the facility below. They'd take small groups down the ladder, show them the laboratory, explain the extraction process. They'd end each tour in front of the remaining containers of refined minerals, carefully secured behind reinforced glass. "This represents about $240 million, Hollis would say. Enough money to solve most of our personal problems. But it also represents something more valuable, proof that you can extract resources without destroying the environment that creates them. Proof that one person with conviction can protect something for decades until the world is ready to appreciate it. And proof that it's never too late to choose courage over comfort." One tour group included a class of high school students from Butte. After Hollis finished speaking, a girl raised her hand. "Mr. Drummond, you're really old. Like, no offense, but you could be my great-grandpa. Weren't you scared you'd die before any of this mattered?" Hollis laughed. "Terrified. Still am sometimes. But here's what I've learned. Being old doesn't mean being useless. Your great-grandpa, whoever he is, has more experience, more perspective, more understanding of what really matters than you do. That's not an insult. That's just time. Willa and I, we've buried spouses, raised children, survived hardships you haven't faced yet. That doesn't make us better than you. But it does mean we know the difference between problems and inconveniences. And we know that how you face your final years matters more than how you spend your youth." The girl nodded slowly. "So you're saying old people can still be heroes?" "I'm saying heroes come in all ages, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to disappear quietly." By the 1-year anniversary of buying the cabin, Pinewood Ridge had been transformed. The population, which had been declining for decades, stabilized and then grew. Young families moved in, attracted by the jobs the trust created and the revitalized community. The school, which had been threatened with closure, added a new wing. 3 new businesses opened on Main Street. But the changes went beyond economics. The town had found its identity again. They weren't just another dying logging community. They were the place that chose environment over exploitation, community over corporation. They were proof that small towns could survive by embracing values instead of selling them. The anniversary celebration was held at the cabin. Hundreds of people hiked up, many bringing food, music, and gratitude. Hollis and Willa stood on the porch, overwhelmed by the crowd, by the noise, by the sheer impossibility of everything that had happened. Sheriff Tom Mullins made a toast. "A year ago, these 2 strangers bought a cabin for $800. We thought they were fools. Turned out we were wrong about a lot of things. Wrong about what one person or 2 people could accomplish. Wrong about whether principles still mattered in a world run by money. Wrong about whether communities could still come together for something bigger than themselves. Hollis and Willa Drummond reminded us who we are, and we won't forget that." The crowd applauded. Someone started singing, and others joined in, voices rising into the mountain air. Hollis felt Willa's hand slip into his, squeezed gently. They'd survived. More than survived. They'd won in ways they never imagined. But the day Hollis would remember most clearly came 2 months later, in late autumn. He and Willa were sitting on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the aspens turn gold. A car came up the drive, and a young woman got out. Early 20s, nervous energy, clutching a folder. "Mr. and Mrs. Drummond?" she called. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced. My name is Kara. I was one of the students in that high school group that toured the cabin." "I remember you," Willa said. "You asked about being old." Kara nodded, climbed the porch steps. "Yeah, that tour, it changed something for me. I was planning to take a job with a mining company after graduation. Good money, family connections. But after hearing your story, after seeing what Mr. Crane built and what you protected, I couldn't do it. I applied to Montana State's Environmental Science program instead. I got accepted, and I wanted to thank you for showing me there's a different way." She opened the folder, pulled out a paper. "I wrote my college admissions essay about you, about how courage isn't just for young people, how the most important stands happen when you have the most to lose. I got a full scholarship. I'm going to study watershed management, and someday, maybe I'll work for the trust, continue what you all started." Willa stood and hugged the girl, both of them crying. Hollis watched, feeling something break open in his chest. This was it. This was the point. Not the money, not the minerals, not even the environmental protection, though all of that mattered. The point was this: showing one young person that principles still mattered, that courage was still possible, that you could choose to be brave even when the odds were impossible.
That night, after Kara left, Hollis and Willa sat by the fire. The cabin was quiet again, just the two of them and the mountain. Hollis pulled out Thaddeus's final letter, the one they'd read 100 times but never tired of.
"Use this wisely," he read aloud. "Use it to heal, not harm. That's all any of us can do." Willa leaned against his shoulder. "We did that, didn't we? We used it wisely. We're still using it, still figuring out what healing looks like. Are you sorry about how our retirement turned out?" Hollis thought about it seriously. They'd planned to spend these years quietly, visiting grandchildren, maybe taking an RV trip out west, fading gently into old age. Instead, they'd fought a corporation, nearly lost everything, became accidental activists, and transformed a dying town. Willa had almost died. They'd been threatened, stalked, and terrified more times than he could count. "No," he said finally, "I'm not sorry. We're the same age as when we started this. We didn't get younger or healthier, but we got braver, we got bigger. We mattered in a way we never did before, and when I'm gone, when we're both gone, we'll leave something behind that helps people we'll never meet. That's not a bad way to spend your final years." "Our final years," Willa corrected. "We're not done yet." She was right. The trust needed stewardship. The community needed nurturing. There were still battles to fight, still decisions to make about which companies could purchase minerals, which projects to fund, how to balance economic development with environmental protection. And there were still moments of simple joy. Grandchildren who came to visit and explored the mountain. Board meetings where Emily would share stories about her father that made everyone laugh. Town gatherings where people would stop Hollis and Willa just to say thank you. Quiet mornings watching sunrise paint the mountains gold. On Hollis's 74th birthday, the family gathered at the cabin. Melissa and Todd came with their families. The grandchildren ran through the snow, playing hide-and-seek among the trees. Emily brought her new husband, a geologist who'd read every one of Thaddeus's journals and treated them like scripture. Saskia showed up with news. A major documentary filmmaker wanted to tell their story. A publisher offered a book deal. The Smithsonian was interested in acquiring some of Thaddeus's equipment for an exhibit on citizen science and environmental protection. But the best gift came from the town. A delegation from Pinewood Ridge presented Hollis and Willa with a hand-carved sign to replace the old Whitaker auto marker. The new sign read, "Drummond Crane Environmental Center, where one man's vision met two people's courage." "You don't have to accept it," the mayor said, "but the town voted. We want people to know what happened here, who made it happen. You're part of this legacy now." Hollis looked at Willa. She nodded. They accepted the sign together, both understanding that they'd become caretakers of more than just a mountain. They'd become guardians of a story, proof that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they chose to be brave. That night, after everyone had left, Hollis and Willa stood at the window watching stars emerge. The cabin was warm, their bellies were full, their hearts were fuller. "You know what's funny?" Willa said. "We came here because we couldn't afford rent. We were broke, scared, desperate. We thought we were buying shelter. Turned out we bought a purpose. Best $800 we ever spent. Best $800 anyone ever spent." They went to bed early, wrapped around each other the way they had for years, the way they hoped to for years still to come. Outside, the mountain stood eternal, patient, holding its secrets and its gifts. Below, in reinforced containers, refined minerals waited for the right time, the right people, the right purpose. And in Pinewood Ridge, in Missoula, in towns and cities across the country, people were reading articles, watching videos, telling friends about two elderly people who'd bought a cabin and changed the world. Some would be inspired, some would take action, some would make their own brave choices, face their own impossible odds, protect their own piece of the world worth saving. Because that's what stories do. They ripple outward, touching lives you'll never know about, inspiring courage you'll never witness. Thaddeus had started the ripple. Hollis and Willa had amplified it. And now it moved beyond them, a wave of possibility proving that it's never too late. You're never too old, and no fight for what's right is ever truly impossible. Anyone can change the world if they're willing to be uncomfortable, to be scared, to be brave anyway. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to keep moving forward when fear is all you feel. And legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. It's what you build while you're alive that continues to matter long after you're gone. As dawn broke over the Montana mountains on a crisp November morning, Hollis Drummond stood at the window of the cabin they'd bought for $800, watching light spread across the valley below. Willa was still sleeping, recovering her strength day by day, and he let her rest. The trust paperwork sat on the desk, ready for another day of decisions about grants and partnerships and the careful stewardship of resources that could change the world. He thought about Thaddeus, who'd worked alone for 20 years protecting something he believed in. He thought about the girl named Kara, heading to college to study watershed management. He thought about all the people in between, the web of connection and courage that had formed around one man's secret and two old people's refusal to give up. They'd come here to survive. They'd ended up showing others how to live. And in the process, they'd discovered that the final chapter of life doesn't have to be about fading away. Sometimes, if you're brave enough, it can be about burning brightest of all. The end. Up next, 2 more stories of courage, hope, and the power of refusing to give up. Click now to keep watching with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe age is no barrier to changing the world.